The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor at exactly 9:47 p.m., and Marcus Webb didn't even turn his head. He'd heard that sound 1,000 times at these Silicon Valley galas, the delicate pop of expensive crystal meeting imported stone, followed by the embarrassed laughter of someone who'd had one drink too many. What made him look up from his cleaning cart wasn't the sound itself, but the silence that followed. The entire ballroom had gone quiet. Marcus had been working at the Fairmont in San Francisco for 11 years, and he'd learned to read a room the way sailors read the ocean. This particular stillness had weight to it, the kind that preceded something ugly. He pushed his cart closer to the wall, trying to make himself smaller, invisible. Night shift janitors learned early that the best way to keep a job was to exist without being noticed. "I'm serious," a voice cut through the silence. Male, confident, amplified by the marble and glass architecture of the Fairmont's grand ballroom. "Anyone here thinks they can beat my team of analysts? Any single one of you? I'll personally write a check for $50,000 and issue a public apology." Marcus recognized the voice. Everyone in San Francisco did. Julian Crane, founder and CEO of Helix Analytics, the company that had revolutionized predictive algorithms for everything from stock trading to climate modeling. Forbes had him at $3 billion last year. Marcus knew because he'd cleaned the magazine from the bathroom where someone had left it, and he'd read it while eating his sandwich during his midnight break. The crowd erupted in nervous laughter, the kind that came from people who weren't sure if they should be amused or offended. Marcus kept his head down, spraying cleaner on a table, wiping in slow circles. The gala was for something. He never remembered what these events were for. Cancer research, education reform, ocean cleanup. Rich people paying $1,000 a plate to eat food they barely touched, convinced that being in a room together while wearing expensive clothes constituted charity. "I'm not joking," Crane continued. Marcus risked a glance. The billionaire stood on a raised platform near the center of the ballroom, microphone in hand, his slim-cut tuxedo probably costing more than Marcus made in 6 months. "We've been talking all night about innovation, about disruption, about being the smartest people in the room, so let's test it. My company employs 17 PhDs from Stanford, MIT, Caltech. Economists, data scientists, mathematicians. They've built models that predict market movements with 94% accuracy. They've consulted for the Federal Reserve. I'm offering anyone here, any of you brilliant minds, a chance to pose a problem. Any problem. Economics, logistics, game theory, resource allocation. You pose it, my team solves it. If they can't, or if your solution is better, I'll cut you a check right here, right now." More laughter, but edged with something else now. Interest, pride. "Julian, you're drunk," someone called out. A woman's voice, amused and embarrassed in equal measure. "I'm not," Crane shot back. "I'm bored. We spend 3 hours at these things congratulating ourselves, and nobody ever actually does anything interesting. So here's something interesting. Prove that you deserve to be in this room. Not because your portfolio manager got lucky, or because your grandfather invented something useful. Prove you can think." Marcus saw heads turning throughout the ballroom, saw the subtle shifts in posture that came when hundreds of competitive people suddenly felt challenged. The tech industry was built on egos, and Crane had just thrown gasoline on a very expensive fire. "Come on," Crane pressed. "I've got my phone right here. One call and I'll have my team on video conference. They're probably still at the office anyway. They usually work until midnight. Someone give me a problem, something hard." A moment of hesitation, then a man in his 40s stepped forward, grey at his temples, suit that screamed venture capital. "All right, Julian, here's one. The Monty Hall problem, classic probability paradox. Let's see if your geniuses can explain it better than the average statistics professor." Crane laughed, actually laughed. "The Monty Hall problem? Are you serious? That's undergraduate material. My 14-year-old daughter could explain that one. I said, give me something hard. Then you explain it, the man countered, his face flushing. Right now, no team, just you. The billionaire's smile didn't waver. 3 doors, 1 car, 2 goats. You pick door 1. Host opens door 3, shows you a goat. You should switch to door 2 because your initial pick had a 1 in 3 chance, but the remaining door now represents a 2 in 3 probability after new information. Basic conditional probability. Next. The venture capitalist retreated, his face crimson. Someone else tried, a woman with a British accent, something about optimal taxation theory. Crane pulled out his phone, made the call. Within 3 minutes, a face appeared on his screen, a young man with thick glasses and anxious energy. Crane held the phone up to the microphone, and the analyst proceeded to deliver a flawless explanation involving Laffer curves and elasticity metrics that left the woman nodding reluctantly. It happened 3 more times. Different people, different challenges. Each time, either Crane answered personally, or his team delivered solutions so thorough, so confident, that the challengers withdrew with weak applause and wounded pride. Marcus finished the table and moved toward the bar area. His shift supervisor, Carla, caught his eye from across the room and made a subtle gesture. Keep working. Don't stare. Don't get involved. Marcus nodded. He'd been cleaning offices and hotels long enough to know that invisible people stayed employed, but he kept listening. This is pathetic, Crane announced, his voice carrying that particular edge that came from winning too easily. I'm standing here offering $50,000, real money, not some tax-deductible charity game, and the best you people can manage is problems from textbooks. This is Silicon Valley. This is supposed to be the smartest square mile on the planet. And nobody here can challenge a team of analysts with a simple logic problem. Marcus's hands stopped moving. He was wiping down the same section of counter he'd already cleaned twice. Something in Crane's tone had shifted from playful arrogance to something uglier, contempt. You know what I think? Crane continued. I think we're all frauds. We sit in these rooms, we wear expensive clothes. We throw around buzzwords like disruptive innovation and paradigm shift, and at the end of the day, most of us are just lucky. Right place, right time, right connections. The actual smart work gets done by people we'll never meet. In office parks we'll never visit while we collect the credit and the cash. The crowd had gone quiet again, but this was a different silence, uncomfortable, angry even. So here's my refined offer, Crane said, and this is the last time. One more challenge. Anybody. Doesn't have to be economics or mathematics. Can be anything. Pure logic, strategy, philosophy, ethics. Give me something my team can't solve, and I'll write you a check for $100,000. Not 50, 100. And I'll issue a public apology in the Chronicle tomorrow morning, admitting that I'm an arrogant jackass who underestimated the intelligence in this room. Marcus realized he'd stopped working entirely. His hands rested on the bar counter, the cleaning spray bottle forgotten. He should move, should find another area to clean, should make himself scarce before Carla noticed. Instead, he heard himself speak. I have one. The words came out quieter than he'd intended, but in the vast silence of the ballroom, they carried. Heads turned, hundreds of them, swiveling toward the bar area where Marcus stood in his grey uniform, name tag slightly crooked, cleaning supplies on the counter beside him. Crane's eyes found him. For a moment, genuine surprise flickered across the billionaire's face, then reset into something that might have been curiosity or might have been mockery. I'm sorry, what? Marcus felt his throat go dry. Every instinct screamed at him to apologize, to say it was nothing, to retreat back into invisibility. He thought of his daughter, Rosa, 13 years old, sitting at their kitchen table that morning complaining about a kid at school who'd called her stupid because she didn't have new shoes. He thought of the way his ex-wife, Gloria, looked at him sometimes, that expression that said she'd settled for less than she deserved. He thought of Julian Crane calling a room full of rich people frauds, while a man in a grey uniform cleaned up their spilled champagne. "I said I have a problem for you," Marcus repeated louder this time. "A challenge." Crane's smile returned, but it had teeth now. "A challenge from the janitorial staff. This ought to be good." He gestured broadly. "Please, by all means, the floor is yours." Marcus felt 400 pairs of eyes on him. The room smelled like perfume and wine and money. His hands were still damp from cleaning solution. He'd spent 11 years being invisible. Tonight, apparently, that ended. "The problem is about value," Marcus began, his voice steadier than he felt. "How do you measure the value of work when the work itself is designed to be invisible?" Crane blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a logic problem," Marcus pressed on, "about economics, about systems, about fairness. You've got hundreds of people in this room worth millions, probably billions combined. You're paying for food tonight that most families couldn't afford in a month. But this room only exists, this building, this event, this entire evening, because of work that nobody here notices. The people who cooked the food you didn't eat, who cleaned the bathrooms you used, who washed the glasses you're drinking from." He gestured at the gleaming ballroom. Every surface in here was cleaned today. Every tablecloth was washed and pressed. Every light fixture was dusted. The floors were polished 3 times this week. The air conditioning was serviced, the carpets were shampooed, the windows were washed on the outside by someone hanging from cables 18 stories up. All of that labor, all of those hours, all of that skill, and I guarantee nobody in this room could tell me the name of a single person who did that work. The crowd had gone still again, but this was different, uncomfortable. Crane's smile had faded. "So here's the problem," Marcus continued. "If work creates value, but that value is only recognized when the work fails, when the floors are dirty, when the food isn't ready, when the systems break down, then how do you build an economic model that accurately prices that labor? How do your algorithms account for work that's essential but invisible, for value that's only noticed in its absence?" He paused, his heart hammering. "And here's the harder part. How much is a person's dignity worth in that equation? Because every single person in this room makes decisions every day about what to pay the people who make your lives possible. And those decisions are based on some calculation, some model, some algorithm in your heads about what that work is worth. So I'm asking your experts, show me the math that proves your time is worth 1,000 times more than mine. Not market value, not supply and demand. Show me the actual logical framework that makes one human being's hour fundamentally more valuable than another's." Silence. Complete, total, suffocating silence. Crane stared at him. The smile was gone entirely now, replaced by something Marcus couldn't read. Anger, embarrassment, actual thought. "That's not a logic problem," Crane said finally. "That's politics." "No," Marcus replied. "It's logic. You build models that predict behavior, that optimize systems, that extract value. I'm asking you to model the system that puts you on that platform and me behind this bar. If your algorithms are as good as you say, they should be able to explain why, not just describe the market forces. Explain the fundamental logic that makes this arrangement fair or optimal or inevitable." The billionaire opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time all evening, Julian Crane didn't have an immediate answer. And in that moment, Marcus knew 2 things with absolute certainty. His life was about to change, and he had no idea if it would be for better or worse. Marcus's phone started buzzing before he even made it to the employee locker room. The first call was from a number he didn't recognize. He ignored it, shoving the phone into his jacket pocket as he clocked out at 11:53 p.m. The second call came 30 seconds later, same number, then a different number. Then text messages started flooding in, the phone vibrating continuously like an angry insect trapped against his hip. He pulled it out in the staff hallway, the fluorescent lights making his eyes hurt after the soft ambience of the ballroom. 15 missed calls, 23 text messages. He didn't recognize any of the numbers. The most recent text read, "This is Jennifer Parks from SF Chronicle. Would love to get a comment on tonight's exchange with Julian Crane. Can we talk?" Marcus stared at the screen. His hand was shaking slightly. He thought about his supervisor's face as he'd left the ballroom an hour earlier. Carla had pulled him aside near the service elevator, her expression somewhere between horrified and impressed. "What the hell were you thinking?" she'd hissed. "Do you have any idea who that was?" "Yeah," Marcus had replied quietly. "I do. Mr. Palmer wants to see you tomorrow. First thing, 9 a.m. She'd paused, her voice softening. "Marcus, I've known you for 6 years. You're a good worker, never late, never complain. But that was... Jesus Christ. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen anyone do in this hotel." Now, standing in the harsh light of the employee area, Marcus wasn't sure which it had been either. He texted Rosa, his daughter, "Going to be late getting home. Don't wait up, love you." Her response came immediately. "Dad, everyone at school is talking about you. Did you really tell off a billionaire?" Marcus's stomach dropped. How did she already know? It had been less than 2 hours. He opened his web browser and typed his own name. The results made his vision blur. "Janitor challenges tech billionaire at charity gala. SF Gate, posted 43 minutes ago. Watch, hotel cleaner's logic problem, leaves Julian Crane speechless. TechCrunch, posted 31 minutes ago. Marcus Webb, the hotel worker who asked Silicon Valley to justify inequality. The Guardian, posted 19 minutes ago. Someone had filmed it. Of course someone had filmed it. Probably a dozen people, all posting to Twitter, Instagram, TikTok while it was still happening. Marcus clicked on the TechCrunch link and watched himself on video, grainy phone footage, but clear enough. He looked smaller on screen than he felt in his memory, his grey uniform shapeless, his face tired, but his voice was steady. "Show me the math that proves your time is worth 1,000 times more than mine." The video had 847,000 views, posted 31 minutes ago. Marcus leaned against the concrete wall, his legs suddenly weak. This wasn't real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. He was 46 years old. He'd lived in the same rent-controlled apartment in the Mission District for 14 years. He cleaned hotel rooms and event spaces for $50 an hour plus benefits. His biggest accomplishment in life was keeping his daughter in a decent school and making sure she never went hungry. And now he was trending on Twitter. The phone buzzed again. This time he answered without looking at the number. "Marcus Webb?" A woman's voice. Professional. Urgent. "Yes." "This is Amanda Chen from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you on the show tomorrow to discuss what happened tonight. We could fly you to New York, or we could do it remotely, via satellite from our San Francisco affiliate. We think this is a conversation America needs to have right now." "I have work tomorrow." "We'd compensate you for your time, of course. And honestly, Marcus, can I call you Marcus? I think after tonight your work situation might be complicated anyway. This is a chance to control your narrative." Control his narrative, as if he'd ever had control of anything. "I need to think about it," he managed. "Of course. I'll send you an email with details. We're hoping to book you for the 8 a.m. hour, which means we'd need you in position by 6:30 Pacific time. I know it's short notice, but honestly, the window on these stories is brief. Tomorrow you're news. Next week you're forgotten. That's just how it works." She hung up before he could respond. Marcus stood there in the hallway, listening to the distant sounds of the hotel, The rumble of industrial dishwashers, the clatter of trash bins being wheeled to the loading dock, the low voices of night security guards changing shifts. This was his world. These sounds, these smells, this space between the public-facing glamour of the Fairmont and the mechanical guts that made it function. He thought about Julian Crane, standing on that platform so certain of his place in the world. The way the billionaire had looked at him after the challenge, not angry, exactly, more like confused, as if Marcus had spoken in a language Crane recognized but couldn't quite translate. The truth was, Marcus hadn't planned any of it. The words had come from somewhere deep and unexamined, some reservoir of frustration that had been filling drop by drop for 11 years. Every condescending thank you from a guest who didn't look at his face, every conversation overheard about vacation homes and private schools and investment portfolios while he scrubbed toilets, every board meeting aftermath, cleaning conference rooms and reading the whiteboard notes about operational efficiency and labor optimization, which he eventually learned was code for firing people like him. He'd watched Rosa come home from school 2 weeks ago, crying because a classmate had seen him working and announced to everyone that Rosa's dad is a janitor, as if that was shameful, as if the work that kept buildings functional and people safe was somehow less than the work of sitting in meetings and sending emails. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife, Gloria. "What did you do? Rosa showed me the videos. Marcus, this is insane. Call me." He texted back, "I'm okay. I'll call tomorrow. Tell Rosa I love her." The response was immediate. "You need to be careful. These people have lawyers. They can destroy you." Marcus pocketed the phone and headed for the employee exit. The night air hit him like a wall, cold, damp, tasting of San Francisco fog and distant ocean. Market Street was still busy, even past midnight. Homeless encampments along the sidewalk, late-night tech workers streaming out of office buildings, tourists stumbling between bars. He walked toward the BART station, keeping his head down. His train wouldn't come for another 20 minutes, but he needed to move, needed to think. A man approached him near the station entrance, 30s, expensive casual clothes, phone in hand. "Excuse me, are you Marcus Webb?" Marcus stopped. "Yeah." "Holy shit, man. What you did tonight was amazing. I've worked in tech for 8 years, and somebody needed to say that stuff. Can I buy you a drink? I just want to talk. I need to get home." "Of course, yeah. But listen." The man pulled out a business card, pressed it into Marcus's hand. "I'm serious. If you want to talk, if you need anything, call me. What you said about invisible labor, about dignity, that's real, that matters." Marcus took the card mechanically, nodded, and descended into the BART station. The fluorescent lights down here were even harsher than at the hotel, casting everything in a sickly yellow-green. A musician was playing saxophone near the fare gates, the sound echoing off tile and concrete. Marcus dropped $1 in the case, more from habit than generosity. The train was half empty, and he found a seat near the back, pressing his forehead against the cool window as the car lurched into motion. The tunnel darkness swallowed them, and Marcus watched his reflection in the glass, a middle-aged man in a grey uniform, looking exactly like what he was. Tired. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He ignored it. What had he expected? That Crane would actually engage with the question, that the billionaire would suddenly realize the fundamental absurdity of wealth concentration and volunteer to redistribute his fortune, that 400 rich people would collectively experience an epiphany about economic justice. No. He'd expected nothing. That was the truth. He'd spoken because staying silent had suddenly felt impossible, like trying not to breathe. And now the words were out there, viral, being shared and debated and dissected by thousands of people who'd never cleaned a bathroom or scrubbed a floor or felt the particular exhaustion that came from being invisible. The train emerged from the tunnel into the Mission District, and Marcus could see his neighborhood through the window, brightly painted buildings, murals of cultural pride and political resistance, taco trucks and bodegas that stayed open until 2 a.m. This had been a working-class Latino neighborhood when he'd moved here, before the tech money started flooding in, before the evictions and rent increases, and sudden artisanal coffee shops. He got off at 24th Street and walked the 6 blocks to his apartment, a second-floor unit in a building that had been pink once, now faded to salmon. The stairs creaked in familiar patterns. His key stuck in the lock the way it always did, requiring a specific angle and twist. Inside, Rosa was still awake, sitting cross-legged on the couch with her laptop open, illuminated by screen glow. She looked up as he entered, her eyes wide. "Dad, you're famous." "I'm not famous," Marcus said, setting his keys on the counter. "I'm just momentarily visible. There are like 1,000,000 videos. People are making memes. Someone made a remix of you saying, 'Show me the math,' with a beat behind it." She turned the laptop toward him, and sure enough, there was his face in a TikTok compilation, his voice auto-tuned and looped. "Show me the math. Show me the math. Show me the math." Marcus closed his eyes. "This is a nightmare." "Are you kidding? Dad, people love you. Look at the comments." She scrolled rapidly. "This man is a hero." Finally, someone said it. "Can we elect this janitor as president? You're like a working-class champion or something. Rosa, go to bed. It's almost 1 in the morning." "But Dad, bed. Now. We'll talk tomorrow." She closed the laptop reluctantly, stood up and hugged him suddenly, fiercely. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Even if it's scary, what you said was true." After she'd gone to her room, Marcus sat alone in the living room, the TV off, the city noise filtering through thin walls, sirens, car horns, someone's music, the rumble of buses on Mission Street. His phone buzzed one more time. He almost ignored it, but something made him look. The text was from an unknown number, but the message made his blood run cold. "Mr. Webb, this is David Kellerman, Chief Counsel for Helix Analytics. Mr. Crane would like to meet with you privately tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss your challenge. He's prepared to take it seriously." "Are you?" Marcus stared at the screen for a long time, watching the cursor blink, waiting for something, another text, a clarification, a sign that this was real. Finally, he typed a single word. "Yes." He sent it before he could change his mind. Then he turned off his phone, sat in the darkness, and wondered what the hell he'd just agreed to. The address David Kellerman had sent wasn't what Marcus expected. He'd imagined Helix Analytics headquarters, one of those glass and steel towers in Soma, where tech companies projected innovation through architecture. Instead, the text directed him to a residential address in Pacific Heights, the kind of neighborhood where houses started at 8 million and went up from there. Marcus took the bus, transferred twice, and walked the final 6 blocks uphill. His legs burned by the time he reached the address. A 3-story Victorian painted dove, grey with white trim, garden perfectly manicured, iron gate that probably cost more than his annual salary. He checked his phone. 1:58 p.m. He was 2 minutes early. The gate buzzed open before he could find an intercom, and a woman's voice came through a hidden speaker. "Mr. Webb, please come to the front door." The garden path was slate, bordered by plants he couldn't name. Everything smelled expensive, some combination of jasmine and money. The front door opened as he approached, and a woman in her 30s stood there, professional but not formal, dressed in dark jeans and a blouse. "Marcus Webb?" "Yes, I'm Sarah Chen, Mr. Crane's executive assistant. Thank you for coming. He's waiting in the study." The interior was exactly what wealth looked like when it stopped trying to impress anyone. Hardwood floors that creaked authentically, walls painted subtle greens and greys, Art that was probably famous but Marcus didn't recognize. No gold fixtures, no marble everything, no desperate displays of affluence. Just quiet, confident money. Sarah led him through a hallway lined with photographs. Crane with various famous people. Crane receiving awards. Crane at what looked like a wedding. Smiling genuinely. Younger. She stopped at a doorway and knocked once. "Come in," Crane's voice. The study was lined with books, floor to ceiling. Real books with broken spines and marginalia. A desk sat near a window overlooking the garden, and Julian Crane stood near it, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, no jacket. He looked smaller than he had on the platform, more human. "Mr. Webb," Crane said, extending his hand, "thank you for coming." Marcus shook it automatically, his mind racing. This wasn't what he'd expected. No lawyers visible, no intimidation, no power play. Just a billionaire in his home, looking oddly uncertain. "Sarah, would you give us privacy?" Crane asked. She nodded and closed the door as she left. Crane gestured to a leather chair. "Please, sit. Would you like anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine," Marcus said, remaining standing. He felt like sitting would put him at a disadvantage, though he wasn't sure why. "Fair enough?" Crane walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the garden. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry for last night, for the way I spoke, the way I conducted myself. That whole performance was—" He paused, searching for words. "Arrogant. Cruel, actually. I was drunk on my own importance, and I made a spectacle of humiliating people for entertainment." Marcus waited, saying nothing. Crane turned to face him. "But I'm not apologizing for what came after, for your challenge, because that wasn't humiliating, that was humbling. There's a difference." "Is there?" "I think so, yes." Crane moved to his desk, picked up a tablet, tapped it a few times. "I've spent the last 18 hours doing something I haven't done in years, actually thinking about a problem instead of delegating it. I called my team, my PhDs, my brilliant analysts. I posed your question to them exactly as you asked it. And they gave me exactly what you predicted they'd give me: market explanations, supply and demand curves, human capital theory, comparative advantage. Every economic model we've built, every algorithm we've deployed, they're all built on axioms that treat labor as a commodity and value as something determined by market forces. Which is fine for prediction. But you weren't asking for prediction, you were asking for justification." Crane set the tablet down. "And that's where it fell apart. Because every model we build assumes the system is legitimate, that the distribution of wealth reflects some underlying fairness or optimality. But when you actually try to prove that assumption, when you dig down to the logical foundation, it's circular reasoning. Markets are fair because markets determine value, and value is legitimate because markets are fair." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not vindication exactly, but recognition. This was an actual conversation, not a performance. "So you're admitting you can't answer the question," Marcus said. "I'm admitting that the question reveals a problem I've been deliberately not looking at." Crane sat on the edge of his desk. "I built Helix Analytics on the premise that we can optimize anything if we have enough data and processing power. We've made millions predicting market movements, resource allocation, supply chain efficiency. But all of that optimization happens within a system I've never questioned. And your question forces the issue. What if the system itself is built on premises that don't survive logical scrutiny?" "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "You write me a check and we both go on with our lives. Is that what you want?" The question hung in the air. Marcus thought about the $100,000 Crane had offered. That would change his life, pay off debt, put Rosa through college, give him breathing room he'd never had. And part of him wanted to say yes, take the money, get out before this got complicated. But he heard himself say, "No, that's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" Crane asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice, no condescension. Marcus moved to the bookshelf, scanned the titles without really seeing them, buying time to articulate something he'd never put into words before. "I want dignity," he said finally. "Not charity, not handouts, not symbolic gestures. I want systems that recognize that every person's time, every person's labor, every person's humanity has inherent value that can't be reduced to market price. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where her father being a janitor isn't shameful, where necessary work is treated as valuable regardless of what algorithms say it should cost." He turned to face Crane. "You asked what your analysts missed. They missed that their models don't account for the human cost of optimization. Every time your algorithms help a company increase efficiency, that usually means cutting labor costs, which usually means firing people or reducing wages or eliminating benefits. You've built tools that extract maximum value from workers while paying them minimum wages, and you've convinced yourself that's optimal because the math works out." "So I'm the villain," Crane said quietly. "No," Marcus replied. "You're the system. You're just the part of it I happen to speak to, but you're also the part with enough power to actually change things, if you wanted to. And if I do want to, what would that even look like?" The question felt like a trap, but Marcus couldn't tell if it was intentional. He thought about all the times he'd imagined this conversation, all the speeches he'd rehearsed in his head while mopping floors or scrubbing toilets. Now that the moment was here, it felt both bigger and smaller than his fantasies. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm not an economist or a business strategist. I clean hotels for a living. But I know that if your algorithms are as powerful as you say, they could be designed to optimize for human dignity instead of just profit. They could account for externalities like poverty, inequality, environmental damage. They could value stability and security and fairness, not just efficiency. That would require redefining the objective function," Crane said, almost to himself. "Instead of maximizing shareholder value, maximize. What? Human flourishing? How do you even quantify that?" "I don't know," Marcus repeated, "but the fact that it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. You didn't build Helix because the problems were easy. You built it because they were hard, and you wanted to solve them." Crane was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he walked to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "I'm going to have a drink. You want one?" "I'm not much of a drinker. Neither am I, usually, but this conversation feels like it warrants alcohol." He poured himself 2 fingers, drank half of it in one swallow. "You know what the worst part is? I've known this for years. Deep down, I've known that the systems I've helped build are fundamentally extractive. But I told myself it didn't matter, because everyone else was doing it. Because fighting the system was futile, because I'd rather be rich than right." He stared into the glass. "I grew up poor, you know. Not poverty, but working class. My father was a mechanic, worked 60 hours a week, barely made enough to keep us housed and fed. I watched him come home every night exhausted, watched the way people looked down on him, watched his body break down from the labor, and I promised myself I'd never end up like that. I'd be the one signing the checks, not cashing them." "So you climbed the ladder and then pulled it up behind you," Marcus said. Crane looked at him sharply, then laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. Yeah, I guess I did. And I told myself it was fine because I'd earned it, because I was smarter or worked harder or took risks. But the truth is, I was mostly lucky. Right place, right time, right connections. And instead of recognizing that, I built an entire company around the premise that markets are rational and outcomes are deserved. He drained the rest of his glass. "You want to know something funny? Last night, after you left, after the video went viral, I had 3 different investors call me. They were worried. Not about the ethics of what you said, not about whether you had a point. They were worried about brand damage, about PR complications, about whether this would affect our valuation. And I realized that even the people who should care most about Helix's success don't actually care about whether we're doing good work. They just care about returns." "So, what are you going to do about it?" Marcus asked. "Honestly, I have no idea." Crane set the glass down. "I have 8,000 employees, 17 billion in managed assets, contracts with governments and corporations across 40 countries. I can't just decide tomorrow that we're going to rebuild capitalism from scratch. Even if I wanted to, the board would fire me, investors would sue, clients would walk. So, nothing changes." "I didn't say that." Crane pulled out his phone, typed something. "What if we start small? What if I use Helix's resources to actually explore your question, not as a publicity stunt, but as a genuine research project? I could fund a team to develop alternative economic models, algorithms that account for dignity and fairness and human cost. It won't change the system overnight, but it would be something. And you'd expect what in return? Good press? Moral redemption? I'd expect you to be part of it," Crane said. "Your question broke something open, Marcus. Not just for me, but for a lot of people. I've had calls from economists, philosophers, labor organizers, all wanting to engage with what you said. You've accidentally started a conversation that needs to happen, so I'm offering you a role in continuing it." Marcus felt the weight of the proposition. This was the moment where his life forked. Accept this, and he'd be stepping into a world he didn't understand, playing a game whose rules he'd never learned. Decline, and he'd go back to his life, which was safe and known and suffocating. "I need guarantees," Marcus said slowly. "I'm not going to be your token working-class voice, your diversity hire for credibility. If I'm part of this, I have actual power to shape the project, and my job at the Fairmont is protected. I'm not giving up my income on a promise." "Done," Crane said immediately. "I'll have David draw up a contract. You'll be a full consultant, paid at executive rates with contractual input on project direction. Your hotel job stays yours as long as you want it." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why does this matter to you?" Crane was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more tired. "Because I'm 43 years old, and I've spent my entire adult life building tools that make rich people richer. And last night, standing on that platform, listening to you speak, I realized that I've become the exact kind of person my father would have hated. I can't undo that. But maybe I can start doing something else." He extended his hand again. "So, do we have a deal?" Marcus looked at the hand, at the man offering it, at the study full of books and the garden beyond the window, and the entire impossible situation. He thought about Rosa, about the million videos, about the fact that his life had already changed whether he wanted it to or not. He shook Crane's hand. "We have a deal, but I want everything in writing, and I want my own lawyer to review it before I sign anything." "Smart man," Crane said, and for the first time since Marcus had entered, the billionaire smiled without irony or performance. "I'll have David send over the contracts tomorrow. In the meantime, prepare yourself. Once we announce this publicly, both our lives are going to get very complicated." "My life is already complicated," Marcus said. "Fair point." Crane walked him to the door, and as Marcus stepped out into the garden, the billionaire called after him, "Marcus, what you said last night about showing you the math? I don't think there is any math that justifies this system, but maybe we can build something better." Marcus nodded and walked back through the gate, down the hill toward the bus stop. His phone was still blowing up with notifications, but he ignored them. He'd respond later, After he'd figured out what to say, after he'd talked to Rosa and Gloria, and maybe even a lawyer. For now, he just walked, letting the San Francisco afternoon wash over him, the fog rolling in from the ocean, the steep streets and Victorian houses, the distant sound of cable car bells. The city felt different somehow, like he was seeing it for the first time from a new angle. He'd challenged a billionaire, gone viral, and somehow ended up in a conversation about rebuilding economic systems. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was, against all logic and expectation, the most hopeful he'd felt in years. And tomorrow, he still had to go to work at the Fairmont. 3 months later, Marcus sat in a conference room on the 32nd floor of Helix Analytics headquarters, looking out over the San Francisco Bay, and tried not to feel like an imposter. The room was full of people who made him nervous. Economics professors from Berkeley and Stanford, labor organizers, representatives from worker advocacy groups, 2 of Crane's senior analysts, and a woman from the Department of Labor whose title Marcus still couldn't remember. Everyone had laptops open, documents scattered across the table, the wall covered with whiteboards filled with equations and diagrams. They were 3 hours into a session on wage modeling, and Marcus's head hurt. The problem with the elasticity approach, one of the Stanford professors was saying, is that it assumes workers have meaningful bargaining power, which is true in some sectors, but not in others. If we're building a model that accounts for dignity, we need to factor in power asymmetries. "Excuse me," Marcus interrupted, and the room went quiet. He was still getting used to that, the way people actually listened when he spoke now. "Can someone translate that into normal language?" The professor looked embarrassed. "Right, sorry. What I mean is—" "I know what you mean," Marcus said, "but if we're building something that's supposed to help actual workers, it needs to be explainable to people who don't have economics PhDs. So try again, but pretend you're talking to someone who cleans your office at night." There was a moment of tension, then the professor nodded. "Fair point. Okay. Right now, the models that determine wages assume workers can just quit if they're paid unfairly. But in reality, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you have kids, if you're an immigrant worried about visas, you can't just quit. You don't have leverage. So the fair market wage isn't actually fair because the negotiation is rigged from the start." "Better," Marcus said. "So the model needs to account for the fact that bosses have more power than workers." "Exactly." Marcus turned to one of the analysts, a woman named Jennifer, who'd been surprisingly helpful throughout this process. "Can you build that into the algorithm?" "We can," Jennifer said, typing rapidly. "We'd need reliable data on worker vulnerability factors, dependence, debt, job market liquidity, legal status. It's doable, but it makes the model complex." "Complex is fine," Marcus said. "Inaccurate isn't." The conversation continued, and Marcus found himself both exhausted and energized. This was the 4th session this week, part of an ongoing project Crane had funded to the tune of $20 million. The goal was ambitious: develop a suite of economic tools that companies could use to optimize for human welfare rather than just profit. It wasn't going smoothly. "The fundamental problem," Crane said from the head of the table, "is that we're fighting against centuries of economic theory that treats labor as interchangeable and value as purely monetary. Even our best efforts are constrained by the systems we're trying to reform. So we need to think bigger," said Maria Torres, the labor organizer Marcus had grown to respect enormously over the past months. "We're not just building tools, we're building an alternative framework. That means challenging assumptions most economists don't even realize they're making." Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. "Dad, my history teacher showed your TED Talk in class today. Everyone thought it was cool. Love you." He smiled. The TED Talk had been terrifying. 18 minutes on stage at a conference in Vancouver, speaking to an audience of tech leaders and policymakers about dignity and labor. But it had gone well, and the video had 2 million views now, spawned articles and debates, and even a satirical sketch on Saturday Night Live. His life had become surreal. The Fairmont had promoted him after the first month. He was now a facilities coordinator, supervising a team of cleaners, making $24 an hour plus benefits. The consulting work with Helix paid another $40,000 a year. Combined with Gloria finally agreeing to shared custody of Rosa, Marcus was the most financially stable he'd been in his adult life. But it wasn't the money that mattered most. It was the conversations. Over the past 3 months, Marcus had spoken at labor conferences, been interviewed by NPR and the New York Times, consulted with congressional staffers on wage policy. He'd met janitors in Detroit who'd organized their workplace after seeing his videos, teachers in Phoenix starting a union, nurses in Seattle renegotiating their contracts. People who'd felt invisible their whole lives, suddenly feeling seen, and through it all, his relationship with Julian Crane had evolved into something Marcus still couldn't quite define. Not friendship. They were too different, came from worlds too separate for that, but something like mutual respect or maybe shared purpose. "All right," Crane said, checking his watch. "Let's break for today. Marcus, can you stay a few minutes?" The room emptied gradually, people gathering laptops and papers, conversations continuing in small groups toward the elevators. Jennifer caught Marcus's eye as she left and gave him a subtle thumbs up. He still wasn't sure what that meant. When they were alone, Crane walked to the window, hands in pockets, the same posture he'd had in his study 3 months ago. "I got a call from the Times this morning," Crane said. "They're running a feature on this project next week. Front page of the business section, possibly above the fold. They want interviews with you and me both." "Okay," Marcus said cautiously. "Is that a problem?" "No. But they're going to ask the obvious question. Has any of this actually changed anything? Have any companies adopted our models? Has policy shifted? Has the world become more fair?" "And the answer is no," Marcus said quietly. "The answer is not yet," Crane corrected. "We've got interest from 2 mid-size companies willing to pilot the wage model. The mayor's office in Seattle is looking at our municipal budget framework. But you're right, it's slow. Slower than I expected." "Change always is. Is it enough?" Crane turned to face him. 3 months ago, you stood in a ballroom and challenged me to prove the system was just. I admitted I couldn't. So we started this project, poured resources into it, gathered brilliant people, and we've made progress. Real progress, intellectually. But materially, practically, nothing fundamental has shifted. Is that success or failure? Marcus thought about it, looking out at the bay. Sailboats moving across blue water, the Bay Bridge in the distance, the city spreading out in all directions. Billions of dollars of real estate, millions of people, countless lives playing out in parallel. "When I challenged you," Marcus said slowly, "I wasn't expecting you to fix everything. I wasn't even expecting you to try. I was just exhausted from being invisible, from watching people treat necessary work like it was worthless. So if you're asking me whether this project is worth it, yeah. It's worth it because we're having conversations that weren't happening before. Because workers across the country are organizing and demanding better. And some of them are doing it because they saw a janitor on video refusing to be invisible. That's not nothing. But it's not enough," Crane pressed. "No," Marcus agreed, "it's not enough. But here's what I've learned these past 3 months. Sustainable change is slow. Revolutionary change is fast, but usually violent and chaotic. What we're trying to do is something in between. Structural reform that actually lasts. That takes time." Crane nodded, turning back to the window. My board meets next month. They're going to ask me to justify the 20 million we've spent on this. They're going to want to see ROI, measurable outcomes, something that translates to shareholder value, and I'm not sure I can give them that. Then don't, Marcus said. Tell them this is a long-term investment in building economic systems that don't collapse under their own inequality. Tell them that optimizing purely for short-term profit is what creates the conditions for social upheaval and political instability, which is actually terrible for business. Tell them that funding this research is the most rational thing Helix has ever done. You think they'll buy that? I think if you're the CEO of an $8 billion company and you can't convince your board to spend 20 million on something that matters to you, then maybe you need a different board. Crane laughed, genuinely surprised. You're much more confrontational than you used to be. Yeah, well, you're rubbing off on me. The arrogant billionaire thing is apparently contagious. I'm working on that. I know. Marcus stood up, gathering his notebook. For what it's worth, I think you're doing better. 3 months ago, you were someone who knew the system was broken, but did nothing about it. Now you're someone actively trying to fix it. That's not redemption, but it's movement. And you? Crane asked. How are you doing? Honestly? Marcus paused. Honesty was complicated. I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm terrified I'm going to say something stupid in an interview and discredit this whole project. I miss the simplicity of just having one job that I understood, but I'm also, I don't know, proud, hopeful. Those aren't feelings I'm used to. Rosa doing okay? She's good, better than good. Actually, having her dad suddenly become semi-famous has done wonders for her social status at school. She's even talking about studying economics, which is either wonderful or my fault. Probably both, Crane said. Listen, before you go, I want to show you something. He pulled up a file on his laptop, turned the screen toward Marcus. It was an email chain, dozens of messages, subject line, wage model implementation proposal. This came in yesterday, Crane explained. It's from Target. Their head of HR wants to pilot our wage model in 300 stores across the Midwest. If it works, they're considering rolling it out nationally. That's 150,000 workers potentially affected. Marcus stared at the screen, reading the formal corporate language, the cautious optimism, the acknowledgement that ethical labor practices may constitute long-term competitive advantage. This is real, he said quietly. This is real, Crane confirmed. Not guaranteed, not finalized, but real. If Target moves forward, other retailers will watch. If it works, genuinely works, improves retention and morale and productivity while treating workers better, it becomes a business case, not just an ethical argument. So we might actually be changing things? We might, Crane agreed. Slowly, partially, but actually. Marcus sat down again, suddenly feeling the weight of the past 3 months, the fear, the uncertainty, the constant sense of being in over his head. All of it had been building toward moments like this, not revolutionary transformation, but incremental, measurable progress. His phone buzzed again, another text from Rosa. Also, Dad, can I bring some friends over this weekend? They want to meet you. Is that weird? He typed back. Only if you promise not to show them the video where I ugly cried on CNN. Her response, too late, already showed them. You're internet famous now, gotta own it. Marcus showed the exchange to Crane, who laughed. She's going to run circles around both of us when she grows up. God, I hope so, Marcus said. She's already smarter than I am. They sat there for a moment in companionable silence, watching the afternoon light shift across the bay. Outside, the city continued its frenetic pace, deals being made, fortunes won and lost, lives lived in the shadow of extraordinary wealth and grinding poverty. You know what's strange, Marcus said. 3 months ago, I thought you were the enemy. The embodiment of everything wrong with the system. And now we're sitting here working together, and I still can't figure out if you're a good person trying to fix things or a bad person trying to buy redemption. Crane considered that. Honestly, I don't think I'm either. I think I'm just a person who happened to end up with a lot of power and resources, and who's belatedly realized that how I use them actually matters. That doesn't make me virtuous, it just makes me slightly less complicit. That's probably the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I'm working on honesty too, Crane said. It's harder than you'd think when you've spent years justifying yourself. Marcus stood up, gathering his things for real this time. I need to get back to the Fairmont. I've got a team meeting at 4, and then I promised Rosa I'd help her with a paper on income inequality. The irony of which is delicious, Crane noted. She's using me as a primary source. Apparently, my dad challenged a billionaire is an acceptable citation in middle school. As it should be, Crane said, walking Marcus to the elevator. Same time next week? Yeah. And Julian? Marcus paused. Thanks for actually taking the question seriously. I know it complicates your life. My life was too simple anyway, Crane replied. Turns out moral complexity is good for the soul. The elevator arrived and Marcus stepped in. As the doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of Crane standing in the hallway, hands in pockets, looking somehow smaller and more human than the man who'd stood on a platform 3 months ago, so certain of his place in the world. The descent was smooth, 43 floors in 90 seconds. Marcus watched the numbers tick down, thinking about trajectories and momentum and the strange ways lives intersect. Outside, the city was bright and cold, typical San Francisco weather. Marcus walked toward the BART station, his mind already shifting to the afternoon ahead, reviewing schedules with his cleaning team, checking inventory, making sure the event spaces were ready for tonight's conference. Mundane, necessary work. His phone rang. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. These days, unknown numbers sometimes meant opportunities. Mr. Webb, this is Catherine Rodriguez from Senator Warren's office. The senator saw your TED Talk and would like to discuss potential legislation around wage transparency and worker protections. Would you have time for a call next week? Marcus stopped walking. Right there on the sidewalk, people streaming around him, a call with the senator, about legislation, about things that might actually matter. Yes, he said. Yeah, I can make time for that. He texted Rosa as he descended into the BART station. You're not going to believe who just called. Her response came immediately. Unless it's Beyoncé, I'm not impressed. Senator Warren. Okay, that's pretty cool. Does this mean I can tell my civics teacher I'm getting inside political information? Absolutely not. Worth a shot. The train arrived, and Marcus found a seat, pressing his forehead against the cool window as the car lurched into motion. The tunnel swallowed them, and in his reflection he saw what he always saw. A middle-aged man in a Fairmont uniform, looking tired. But underneath that, maybe something else, something that hadn't been there 3 months ago. Not confidence exactly, not certainty, but possibility, the sense that his voice, that any voice, mattered if you were brave enough to use it. The train emerged from the tunnel, and San Francisco spread out before him. Beautiful, broken, expensive, struggling, dreaming. A city of extremes and contradictions, of billionaires and janitors, of extraordinary innovation and grinding poverty. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Marcus Webb, who'd spent 11 years being invisible and was slowly, painfully learning to be seen. The transformation wasn't complete, probably never would be. But it was happening, one conversation, one policy proposal, one challenged assumption at a time. He closed his eyes and let the train carry him toward home, toward Rosa, toward whatever came next. It was enough. For now, it was enough.